welcome to all of you to this session on philosophy and distance learning. As you all know, we have started philosophy program in the Indira Gandhi National Open University since July 2009. We started with a BA program in philosophy. The BA philosophy courses are electives in its form, which any student in the BDP program, that is bachelor degree program, can choose any of the courses while pursuing the bachelor degree program. In order to get a BA in philosophy, one has to choose philosophy as a major with 48 credits out of the 96 credits. We shall be discussing about the basics of philosophy in the context of distance learning. To my left, I have an expert, Dr. Johnson Puthampurakil, who has about 25 years of teaching experience in philosophy. He has a PhD in philosophy and his expertise is on Western philosophy. Right now, he is teaching philosophy in Eluru in Andhra Pradesh. To his left, we have Dr. George Pandamakal, who has 2 PhDs in philosophy. He has several books to his credits on philosophy. More than 2 decades of teaching experience. He was very much associated with Indira Gandhi National Open University as a senior consultant when we were planning, designing and developing the BA philosophy program. Professor George was with us for 1 full year. And to my right, we have Professor M.R. Nandan. He is from the Government College for Women in Mantia in Karnataka. Professor Nandan has got more than 38 years of teaching experience and he is an expert in logic. Now, to begin with, I would request Dr. Johnson to kindly explain to the viewers in simple terms what is philosophy and the importance of philosophy in a university curriculum.
Thank you, Professor Thomas. It is a very good question to start with because the philosophy traditional definition, love of wisdom. But today we have come more than the traditional definition of philosophy. It is born of human's curiosity, curiosity to know on everything. But it is not, that knowledge is not limited to the in its empiricality, but in its transcendental level. Let me explain. It is not merely, we are not just to know what something is, but the meaning of something is, the meaning of life, meaning of freedom, meaning of immortality, meaning of the world, and so on. So philosophy goes as a more fundamental question than other empirical sciences. Let me, in this context, I would put it, philosophy as something that enables, philosophy as something that empowers, and philosophy as something that enlightens, enables a person to know. Philosophy enables. It is not, so I am able to know because I am enabled to know. So it is the philosophy that enables us to know. And philosophy also empowers. There is some Chinese proverb that don't just give a fish, but rather teach the people to fish. And that is empowering. If I am given a fish, I am able to feed myself today with that fish. But if I am empowered to a fish, then I am able to feed myself not only today but also other days. So philosophy in that way is empowering, also enlightens to see. From the Eastern point of view, philosophy is not taken as a merely love of wisdom, but rather as a seeing, darshana. I think in the West too, today philosophy is considered more as a seeing. So the light enables us to see what is to be seen, see the reality, see the meaning of the reality, and thus philosophy is a fundamental science. Let me also just refer to the distinction between philosophy and philosophizing. Oftentimes they are taken as synonyms, but there is a difference. Philosophy is nominal in its structure, but philosophizing is verbal, and not merely a grammatical difference. Philosophy is something static, the product of thought, product of thinking, but philosophizing is the process of thinking. And in today's understanding of philosophy, philosophizing is a better term to employ, because we do not consider philosophy as something that we have a thought that is carried out, but rather a constant process, a constant search, that especially in the context of postmodern thought, I think philosophizing is more appropriate because it takes into consideration time and space. We philosophize and we are not come to a last solution to the questions, but rather we keep on searching in time and space, and therefore philosophizing remains a finite process, and that makes philosophy something humble at the same time dynamic.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Here in IGNO, we are offering a philosophy program through distance learning, and perhaps IGNO is the first university to have come out with well-prepared material on philosophy, on various aspects, on various courses. And since Dr. George was very much associated with the program development process, I would request Professor George to briefly tell us about the importance of philosophy in the context of distance learning.
Thank you, Professor Ignatius. Indira Gandhi National Open University stands very much for distance learning. Now, distance learning is so important in the world today, wherein many people or a number of people cannot go to the schools and colleges themselves. Even this university makes it possible for them to sit at home, sit in one's own room and study. And that possibility is very, very rare. Now, philosophy and distance learning, when we ask the question, how can philosophy also be understood through distance learning? Is it not something too difficult for the students? Yes, it is possible for them. In fact, philosophy has greater chance as a distance learning mode for following it. Why it has more prospects? Because philosophy does not require a laboratory like other experimental sciences. Then the statistics are much less. Therefore, visiting a classroom or a university or college is not so much needed for philosophy. Even the people with the basic knowledge can just remain in one's own place and still learn, and therefore it is possible. But then there is also another possibility is that humans everywhere think alike. Therefore, even if we frame, or even if we make not sufficient for everybody, or we think that they have to be given the units prepared, and then they can also remain at their own places and learn and give the examination too. This kind of possibility is very much. But it has also certain problems. That philosophy is generally understood as an abstract subject, a speculative subject. And as there are also many terms that are hard for the ordinary students to follow. And that is a problem in distance learning. But I also have certain, I can suggest certain ways and means to overcome such difficulties. First of all those who write the units, chapters, they have to use simple language, keeping in mind that all these students are, most students are at a distance or elsewhere they remain and they study. And for that they could also use a number of illustrations and examples. And these through illustrations and examples, the ideas can be understood by ordinary students. And that is using more and more illustrations, more and more examples, rather than giving a dissertation type or dissertation like module or units. Because students who are not also simplifying the language, avoiding ambiguous languages, because philosophers are very often, some thinkers use ambiguous language, ambiguities are there, or the terms taken from their own cultural context, and therefore would not be understood by others who are in other countries, who are elsewhere. And that is therefore it has both prospects and problems, I see.
Yeah, I think that was a good explanation about how we need to take seriously about study of philosophy, particularly through distance learning. And now, Professor Nanthan, you are very much associated with us in our course preparation team as well as an expert for designing the curriculum. Can you explain to our audience about the how philosophy helps us in our day-to-day life?
Thank you, Dr. Thomas. Philosophy helps us in our daily life in the sense that philosophy is a way of life. In Indian context, we know that philosophy is a way of life. Learning philosophy is one thing. Applying philosophy to life is something different. Taking things as they come is the best example for the application of philosophy to life. In this respect, I think the best example I should take is from sports. How do we take the result of sports? Whether we win or lose, we accept. That's how we should take life. And this is possible only when we apply philosophy to life. And I think it is in that sense that philosophy helps us to lead a better quality, not just length. It is a quality of life which matters. It is possible to lead a better quality of life when philosophy is applied to life. That is what I think.
Well, now let us come back to some important concepts and areas of philosophy, and one is philosophy and wisdom. Perhaps Dr. Johnson could explain to us about the concept of philosophy and wisdom.
Okay, when I spoke about philosophy, I said Aristotle gives the definition of philosophy as love of wisdom. But wisdom is related to philosophy in a more radical manner, much more than, not because it is occurring in the definition, but because it is closely linked to philosophy. And for this, we have to differentiate between knowledge and wisdom. I would put this way: knowledge is something which is actual. I know something and I remain within the boundary of knowledge. When I know something and I know only that much. But wisdom enables us to go beyond the boundary. For instance, when I know, I can say I know. But in the case of wisdom, I have to say I know that I do not know. So when I reach the boundary of knowledge and then see what is beyond, then I think we reach the realm of wisdom. the indefinite possibilities that are there, then we see not what we know, but rather what we do not know. I think that is wisdom. We can also relate wisdom or explain wisdom in some other ways as well. Wisdom, I already said, wisdom enables us to see, enables us to be a seer. Seer not only of what is actually present, but also possibilities. Possibilities are indefinite. Even the possibilities, we can narrow down the possibilities to our actuality. Only I am able to see only those things which I have experienced. That is lack of wisdom. A wise person will be able to see possibilities even what in which he is not expert. So it is possible, although I am not competent. So acceptance of possibility is a sign of wisdom. Another point is wisdom enables us to extend ourselves both to the past as well as to the future. Normally we speak about memory and imagination, but these days we speak about memory of the past and memory of the future as well. We are able to extend ourselves when we know we limit ourselves to the present, but when we are able to go back as far back and also correspondingly as far ahead to the future, that calls for wisdom. When for instance, it is easy to make an assessment about something that has taken place, but the plan to organize something that needs wisdom, that needs imagination. So imagination I'll put along with wisdom, because it is it calls for not only just about what is actual, but also about what is possible. So in various respects, wisdom I find is very close, very much related to philosophy rather than to an empirical science.
Well, philosophy and immortality is another important topic that we usually discuss in the curriculum, and perhaps Dr. George could explain to us about philosophy and immortality.
Thank you, Professor Gracious. This is another question that often people ask when we go elsewhere, on your journey or in interpersonal communication. Persons ask, yes, you are a philosopher, can you tell us whether there is a possibility of life after death, whether I will survive? And I think I was also reflecting it for a long time, how to explain to ordinary people how human is going to be immortal. And I think there is we can together reflect and see how it is possible. Say, for instance, we have a number of ideas in us. If we put together all those ideas, we can write volumes and volumes of books. Where are they all stored? Go for a surgery, and we will not be able to recover any of these ideas, neither during life of a person nor after death. And where are they? So that is something that remains inexplicable. They are not material, we are very sure. They are not material. If they were something material, we could have measured. Nobody speaks about the length of one's ideas or the weight of one's ideas. Nobody speaks. At the same time, it is a common experience. We all have ideas. And these ideas, if they are not material, then they must be spiritual. And only that which is material will be decomposed, will decay and undergo death and decay. And therefore, if it does not undergo, then that which is spiritual will really survive. And these ideas also must survive. But how do these ideas survive in us? These ideas are always connected in some way by intellect, will and memory. The three faculties that are there. If these operations, ideas, judgment, thinking, or all these, if they are spiritual, then naturally the faculties from which they proceed must also be spiritual. And if the ideas are spiritual, the faculties are spiritual, since there are three faculties in us, intellect, will and memory, there must be a coordinating principle of all these three faculties. And that's generally, usually people understand as a Atman, or generally, or there are some languages, Indian language also, they call it Sanskrit Atman, or also the soul. The tradition, the Western mind sometimes calls it a soul, or mind also generally, as a coordinating principle of it. And that must be, in that case, that also cannot die, because that is not something in itself, it is not something material. If it is not material, it must survive, it cannot die. And that is an argument for immortality. From Plato onwards, philosophers have thought about it, and I also think that makes sense. There is an element, whether you call it soul or whatever it is, there is an element in a human that this way survives death, survives physical death. Therefore, immortality is a possibility.
Well, every subject or every discipline has methods, and philosophy is no exception. Perhaps Professor Nandan could explain to us about methods of philosophy, so that we also have an idea about what are these methods.
Generally, we can say that critical analysis is the method of philosophy. But then, to restrict ourselves to only one method like this amounts to taking sides with philosophers. There are philosophers who developed different notions. There was opposition developed to, I can say, intellectualization of philosophy. It happened in 20th century. Bergson is one among them. We can say pragmatists also are there. Bergson, for example, believed that intuition is the method of philosophy. And there are several methods. Phenomenology is another method. But even when, this is the point, even when you say that criticism is not the only method of philosophy, you are criticizing criticism itself. So even when a philosopher opposes the view that criticism is the method of philosophy or critical analysis is the method of philosophy, he is employing the same tool. So without critical analysis, there can be no philosophy. That is the essence of philosophy. That's how philosophy grows and is growing.
Well, let us go into more serious aspects of the subject. One of the courses under philosophy is on metaphysics. And here we have an expert, Dr. George Pandamakel, who is an expert on metaphysics. And Professor, can you briefly tell us about the concept of metaphysics and how metaphysics becomes an important part of philosophy curriculum?
Okay, thank you, Professor, for the question. Metaphysics was, the term metaphysics was actually coined by Andronicus Rhodes, a Greek thinker's disciple of Aristotle, around 70 AD. But Aristotle was the one who really wrote the metaphysical principles and developed metaphysics, though he never called that subject metaphysics. And Aristotle defined metaphysics as an investigation into being as being, or later you would call it a science of being as being. Now, many people may find it difficult to understand what is meant by being as being. For instance, now this glass, or something that is before me, pen or a pencil, I see a thing there, I see another thing again I come across, one after the other I come across things like that. But suppose I pause for a little while and ask a question. What is this pen? Why is it a pen? Why not it be something else? Then I will be considering that pen as pen. Suppose I go and make a study and then later on develop that into something of it can even like the sciences are developed in that way. When we study something from all its aspects, sciences are developed. Then a thorough investigation is made into something, then a science is developed. Same way, when we ask the question what this being is, then the science of being is developed, and that is what we understand as metaphysics. This is the meaning of metaphysics. But little more to say, every one of us has the experience of being. How is that experience of being? Let me just ask a very fundamental question, or the most fundamental question. Descartes, Heidegger, they all asked fundamental questions. For example, Descartes asked, can a human know anything at all? Can I know anything at all? Can I be sure of anything at all? And Heidegger would have, why are they beings rather than nothing? But I feel they are all limited questions still. We can have still more fundamental question, and that is there anything at all? And if somebody says there is nothing at all, that statement nothing at all would be again something. At least that statement there is nothing at all should be there, which is again something. Or suppose somebody wants to be a skeptic and say, there may be, I do not know. Again, at least that statement, I do not know, there may be like that. Even if one says, at least that statement should be there. Therefore, the experience of absolute nothingness is an impossibility. Therefore, every time we always have an experience of something. That experience, wherever we go, whatever we say, whatever we do, every time all our experience is conditioned by the experience of the most primordial experience of this something. And that something is what we understand as being. In Indian philosophy, philosophers call it Tadegam in Asadhya Sukta, or Brahman in the Upanishads, Brahman and Atman in the Upanishads, and the Tao in the Japanese philosophy. And like that we find, and also later on with the people identify God. Then there's another question altogether. But this is the exactly what metaphysics deals with. And now what is the relation between philosophy and metaphysics? I would say the essence, the core of philosophies, being, core of philosophies is the question or the meaning of being, and therefore metaphysics itself. Therefore, metaphysics and philosophy are very closely and inseparably related. Thank you.
Well, just like metaphysics, we also have another important course, that is what we call ethics. And perhaps Dr. Johnson could highlight on the course on ethics under the philosophy program. Dr. Johnson.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Thomas. When I defined philosophy as the knowledge of the whole reality in its ultimate causes, ethics also is included in that one, because we are not taking reality merely as it is, but also as it should be. So ethics speaks about the ought character, what one has to be. So philosophy as a primordial science or primordial knowledge cannot leave aside the ought dimension, not merely analyzing what something is, but how it has to be. And that is especially with regard to the human beings. In contemporary period, that is referred to as, or in terms of responsibility. I am not simply a human being, I am also responsible to the various dimensions, responsible to God, responsible to other people, responsible to the cosmos, and responsible to myself. So I am responsible. That is the ought dimension, and that ought dimension, philosophy also gives attention to that dimension. That is the vast domain of ethics.
Okay, we have another important thing to talk about, that is philosophy and logical thinking. I think Professor Nandan is the best person to highlight on that issue. Professor Nandan?
We know that epistemology is an important branch of philosophy, and that is how we see philosophy has come to be regarded as a study of knowledge, or criticism of knowledge, or love of knowledge, call it as you like. Now, how do we acquire knowledge? Logic, you can say, is the tool with the help of which we acquire knowledge. Unless we think, unless we know how to think, that is equally important. It is not sufficient if you think, you should think correctly. So, unless we think and unless we think correctly, we cannot acquire knowledge. So, in this sense, philosophy and logic are interrelated. Not only they are interrelated, they are also inseparably related. This is one aspect. The other aspect is this: what should we know? This is also equally important. Unless we are very clear about what we should know, or what we can know, or what we want to know, we cannot proceed further. Logic helps in this regard. One thing, it helps us to think correctly. It helps us to decide what we can know. And finally, it helps us to acquire knowledge. That is how, you see, philosophy grows. Unless we apply logic, philosophy cannot grow.
I think there's a question from the audience. Please identify yourself and then put the question. Yeah.
I am Thomas Padian. It is in reference to Professor Johnson's starting point of philosophy. He was referring to the starting point of philosophy as curiosity, human curiosity. But of course, I think we should add together with the curiosity what Aristotle says as the starting point, the point of wonder and astonishment. So I think maybe to complement human curiosity also together with the wonder and astonishment. And also now we are speaking with the philosophizing. That's why nowadays we say that philosophy is not only an intellectual learning, but basically a doing of the intellect. And in the Indian understanding, we say that philosophy is darshana, a way of life. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was not a question, it was an observation. There's somebody else.
I'm Vishant. I'm Professor of Philosophy in JDV Pune. This question is to Dr. Johnson. It's a very pragmatic question. Yeah. The distinction you made about philosophy and philosophizing was excellent one. Yeah. As I see, the IGNOU has launched this distance education is philosophy, which is very welcoming sign, where I think the first step is taken. That means the students are given opportunity to learn philosophy. As a philosopher, would you recommend that IGNOU should go for an online program in philosophy where real philosophizing can take place?
Thank you. Dr. Johnson?
Of course, I am not competent to speak about the online program in philosophy, but anything that contributes towards philosophizing, not simply learning from what is already written and preserved, but anything that enables people to grow in their thinking, that we must venture into.
Yeah.
Thank you, professors, for your wonderful explanation of philosophy and philosophizing. When I compare philosophy with other subjects, generally if you in the empirical sciences, we are busy in the laboratory, as Professor George said. In social sciences, we are busy in the field work. And even in mathematics, we are busy with some symbols. In philosophy, what are we busy with? Where do I learn philosophy?
Any of you?
Philosophy is a primary task is to ask questions of meaning. And I find the questions of meaning, that means what something means, what does it mean? And that also is very much connected with the truth, another the object of philosophizing, asking whether it is true or not. But fundamentally I feel philosophy is not dealing with the truth, because there are also other sciences that are equally concerned about truth. But philosophy, as the linguistic philosophers also follow the same or the same line, it is asking the question of the meaning of life, meaning of existence, meaning of things around. Therefore, it becomes inseparably part and parcel of our life.
Can you be brief now?
Yeah. I am Xavier, Professor of Philosophy from Bhopal. IGNOU has taken a significant step in including philosophy as part of distance learning. In the absence of conventional supportive structures, how do you motivate a student to learn philosophy? As you said, already the students have the impression that philosophy is abstract and boring. This is to Professor Pandamakal.
Motivating the students, we as I said, we need to use various techniques, like simplifying the language and explaining it also in terms that are contextual, if possible. Also like this online program also could be introduced, and thus we can create interest. But then we cannot say there are also people who are, even if they are they are not directly concerned about philosophy as a professional subject, something like that. There are many interested in it. Because I remember when I studied here in IGNOU itself, I found there was a military a person who was retired from military. He requested Professor Gracious Thomas to start this MA philosophy program, so that he could also register. And there are so many people, because philosophy asks various questions. This is a field, it's a wonderful field where you have a tremendous possibilities of asking questions about everything and anything that which one can imagine of.
Okay.
It's regarding the philosophical methods. Since there are more than one method, how do you plan to resolve the problem of the conflict among methods?
Madam, will you please repeat the question, madam?
It's regarding the philosophical methods.
Yeah.
Since there are more than one philosophical method, how do you plan to resolve the conflict among methods?
Madam, there is no plan as such on my part to resolve the conflict. When I said that there are several methods, it's just a matter of fact statement. I said we cannot take sides with any particular philosopher and say that this is the only method which philosophy follows or philosophy ought to follow. Suppose you run through the history of philosophy, whether Indian or Western, you notice that at different points of time, different philosophers opted for different methods. It is just a case. Choice of method depends upon your temperament, your approach. So there is no question of resolving the conflict. In fact, when there is conflict, there is philosophy. I mean, when there is conflict of ideas, we will have philosophy. Suppose there is no conflict of ideas, I don't think philosophy will survive. But philosophy does survive because you have what Feyerabend says in one place, proliferation of ideas. When there are several ideas, clash is natural, and it is this clash which gives support to philosophy. So I believe there is no, I am giving a very different answer perhaps which you did not expect. I don't say that clash or conflict should be resolved. It should remain as it is, so that philosophy grows.
I am Dr. Lourdenathan from Madurai. It's interesting to note philosophy is enabling in the sense of activity. I go along with Professor Johnson. Could you tell us how philosophy could be socially enabling? Is it only individually enabling,
or could it be sociably enabling?
Thank you for that question. We'll try to be brief. You have to wind up now.
Yeah. I did not make a distinction between socially and individually. In fact, human being is both individual and social. When individuals are enabled, the society is enabled. So, of course, we have to highlight, or we have to give priority for social dimension as well, especially in the context of today. I think it's a good point that has to be taken note of.
Well, I am ever grateful to Dr. Johnson, Dr. George, and Professor Nandan for highlighting the importance of philosophy, especially in the context of distance learning. As I said in the beginning, the university has two programs of study, the BA Philosophy and the MA Philosophy, and the viewers, thank you very much.
And could get the benefit of the insurance scheme. And the coverage of these crops were also enhanced, that is, number of crops were brought into the purview of the insurance scheme. Approach was, again, the area approach was used, and it also provided subsidy to the tune of 50% to the small and marginal farmers. So this scheme provided subsidy to the small and marginal farmers to the tune of 50%. Then we also had a scheme, another scheme that is very important scheme, that is a pilot seed crop insurance scheme, was launched in the year 1999 because we know that the seed production is a very capital intensive enterprise, and the loss has to be insured in order to see that more number of people they come forward to take up seed production and make it available to the farming community. The crops which are covered under this scheme is the breeder, foundation and certified seeds of paddy, wheat, maize, etc. So these crops were covered under this scheme, and the objective is to strengthen the confidence in existing seed breeder and growers. So seed growers, to instill confidence in the seed growers, to provide financial security to seed breeder, grower in failure of seed crop. In the event of failure of seed crops, these financial security need to be provided to the breeder or grower. The following stages are covered under the pilot seed crop insurance scheme, that is the failure of seed crop either in full or part, loss in expected raw seed yield, loss in seed crop after harvest. So after harvest, if there is a loss of seed crop, and loss at seed certification stage. So either of these events the farmer is insured. Then the last insurance structure is the Rainfall Insurance, which was launched by ICICI Lombard in association with World Bank and IFC, and it was launched in Memorandar district of AP, and it was started in the year 2003, and this was limited to crop loans which were given by the KBS. And the insurance is payable if the cumulative rainfall during the period falls below the historical average. The disadvantage of this rainfall insurance is nature of product is complex. Such a product is very complex and cannot be understood by the farmers. So this was one of the basic disadvantages of this rainfall insurance, and it also depended on large rainfall data, which is made available only from the IMD, which has observatories only one in each district. The advantage of this is it gives a scope for public-private partnership in extending insurance service to the farmers. Poor coverage of public insurance policies gives a scope for entry of private sector into the insurance sector. Offers scope for use of latest technologies, that is the GIS, remote sensing, etc. can be used for insurance.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar. You explain us about the various institutional infrastructure for the agriculture finance, public, scheduled commercial banks we have discussed, the cooperative bank we have discussed about, then the microfinance schemes we have discussed, then various insurance system also we have discussed. Thank you very much for coming over here.
Thank
you very much.
Thank you.